So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the participants coming from different countries around the world. So, who had registered for this workshop from USA, France, Singapore, Turkey, India, Serbia, Iraq, Hungary, Italy, Hong Kong, Brazil, UK, and Greece. My name is Fotini Diamantidaki, and I'm the president of the Communication Institute of Greece. We are here today to attend the first of the 2022 workshop series organized by the Communication Institute of Greece with the mission to share and negotiate knowledge. Our aim is to keep the international academic and professional community interacting throughout the year. With the above principles in mind, we are glad to introduce you to this workshop entitled Teaching Literature in the Language Classroom, the basis of establishing an intercultural dialogue and students redefining their own identity. The workshop will demonstrate how teaching literature in the foreign language classroom can provide a flat platform for students to start a dialogue over a contentious subject that they would not approach otherwise. Examples will be presented from the Francophone literature alongside their translations. The workshop is led by the President of Research and Academic Affairs of the Communication Institute of Greece and Associate Professor at UCL Institute of Education, University of London, UK, Dr. Fotini Diamantidaki. So I will stop sharing my screen. I will give the right to be a host to Fotini, and Fotini, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for such a formal presentation. Thank you all for being here. It's such a pleasure to see you all, and thank you for your support. I will share the screen and we can start unpacking the next hour lots of elements on this. So looking at the title itself, I think there's a lot of things to unpick. So I will start discussing a little bit the rationale of the language classroom, the culture in the language classroom, how literature fits into the language classroom, and then the value of establishing the intercultural dialogue, and especially for the students. What is the value for the students? And we will finish off with the extracts and looking at those, how to apply all of what we are discussing in practice. Now, let's see if the screen will actually change. That's it, great. So my perspective, I have to say, comes from the UK classroom. Have been a French teacher myself for many years, and now an academic looking at the language learning and all the issues surrounding teacher education and foreign language learning in general. I think that we keep saying that we're teaching in a communicative classroom. And then I argue whether that's the case. From my experience, what tends to take place is rote learning and regurgitation of language chunks that students do not get to apply in a communicative way. This results in students learning a lot of vocabulary, a lot of grammatical items, and it's difficult for them to put it all together in a sentence in many occasions. So I believe in this context, culture actually comes as a luxury, and it's very much second rate, possibly just added at the end of term to keep the students busy. But what I see in this case, when I observed and experienced myself this pedagogy, it's not all, it doesn't all stem from negative perspectives. Unfortunately, there is this exam culture that imposes teachers to work in this way. And I want to hear from you in a few seconds, whether you think that's true in the place where you are in the world, whether you think exams and teaching just the language and culture being a little bit on the sidelines is true, either from your own experience as learners, from your own schooling, or from any other educational contexts. Now, learning a language in such a sterile way, what I find really difficult is that students find it very alien. It's not linked to their own reality. They don't recognize themselves in the process. And what I found always happens is that they forget the very little that they learn. So they learn those linguistic chunks in isolation. They don't see them in context very rarely. So what happens is that language for the students as a result does not make sense, and they don't retain it for transfer. That means to use it, to use it again. So what I see happening, unfortunately, is that they lose the motivation. They lose the motivation and the lack of enjoyment in language learning. And I want to change that with what I'm proposing today. So thinking about the students, they lose the purpose of learning, and they struggle to see how this rote learning will ever be useful to them. So portraying this experience, I want to hear from you. Let's look at the chat. I want to hear from you. Either put your hand up or write something in the chat, whether you think that separation, that active separation of language and culture actually applies to where you are in the world. We would love to hear from you. So do take some time to think about it if you want to, while I'm moving on to the next slide on culture specifically. So thinking that, unfortunately, that is the case, we argue, either as scholars or as practitioners, that language and culture should go side by side. They should be unified in the classroom. However, I think it's easier said than done. Reiterating it even when it's cornered out of the classroom in the name of linguistic content and coverage, I think it's challenging to do and very easy to settle and not reinstate it. I also, again, appreciate all the challenges surrounding this endeavor, as this would mean rethinking the entire schemes of work to fit for purpose. Now, there are also challenges in terms of staffing, the limited number of hours attributed to language learning, that I'm not naive that all these challenges make it really difficult to reinsert culture into the language classroom. Now, thinking though the type of culture that we bring in the classroom, in the literature, as you can see in bullet point 2, there is this distinction of culture that for me is a little bit problematic, and I feel actually quite uncomfortable with it, and I wanted to share it with you. So there is not in the literature the distinction between culture with a capital C and culture with a small c. So capital C is all the elements that are identifiable in each culture, such as history, literature, architecture, geography. And the little c is the beliefs, the customs, the behaviors attributed to that culture. Now, if some of you, or if we all accept this distinction of culture, we could argue as teachers, as educators, that the small c, which is the beliefs, the customs, the behaviors, is more important to learn when we want to communicate. Because if we argue that we are in a communicative classroom, we need those to be able to communicate. According to a researcher called Gramsci, some of you may have heard of, the small c is indeed more useful to learn because it represents the norms of appropriateness for that language. So in this slide then, culture with a capital C is not so important, and probably you would say rather too elitist to access with the very limited amount of vocabulary that I argued students have access to. So therefore, long texts can actually add to the complexity or the challenge into the classroom. And so that's why they're chosen to be kept at bay. So we don't use anything that's beyond vocabulary and small sentences. Now, what I have a problem with is that distinction. I think that access to any cultural elements, whether categorized as part of culture with a capital C or as part of culture with a small c, are both extremely valuable assets in the classroom, as long as they are brought in with a purpose. So cultural elements, again, whether big C or small c, can actually allow pupils to position themselves towards culture they know nothing of. So I wanted to make clear the rationale and the distinction that I don't separate culture like that. And therefore I don't see literature as an elitist way of culture to bring into the classroom. I see it quite differently, which I will continue to share with you in a minute. But before I do that, I think it would be nice to have maybe some breakout group of just 5 minutes to discuss two things and also to get to know each other. One would be from the slide before, what is, do you think that what I said about the language classroom applies to where you are? And the second one, what is your experience of culture in relation to language learning? Is there active separation? What type of culture have you experienced when you were learning a language? So if that's okay with everyone, I would like to create some small breakout groups. So that means it will be good to have 6. So that means 3 participants per room. Is that okay? So that then you actually get to speak to each other.
Fotini, can you just please repeat what we have to do another time?
Put the questions as well in the chat.
Okay.
No problem at all. So the first question is about the experience with language learning in your context, and whether you think there is an active separation of language and culture, and then your experience with culture itself within language learning. I will put the questions in the chat as well for everyone. So it's just 5 minutes to share your thoughts from your perspective, okay? And it'll be random groups anyway. Okay, off you go, enjoy, and I'll bring you back in 5 minutes. Julie Eberstadt, don't worry about it. I got your message. It's not a problem. You can stay in this room.
Thank you very much. I'm really enjoying the session. I'm just not participating this morning.
No problem at all. Thank you for being here.
Yep.
And we have another participant, Dr. Saurabh Sharma. I hope you can hear us. I can maybe put you, because room 6 actually only has one. Put you to room 1. Move to room 5. I'm not sure, maybe there's some connection problems. Dr. Sharma, you can hear us? Okay, let's put the questions. Back. Everybody's coming slowly back. That's brilliant. And it will be really nice to hear from your discussions. If somebody would like to share, what have you discussed? It'd be nice for everybody to hear each other's groups' discussions. Anyone brave enough to actually share what you discussed in your group? Well, keep coming back. That's it. I think we need to have a bit more. That's it. Everybody now. Brilliant. Thank you so much for engaging, and I hope you got a chance to get to know new people as well. So anybody would like to share from the discussions that you just had, your thoughts on the 2 questions? It'd be really nice to hear from different parts of the world how you think language learning and culture are taking place.
I can try if you want.
Yes, Leah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. So I was with Clémentine and Claire. We are all from France, from Lille. And so we are still students, not teacher yet, but we thought that you learn, as a learner, you learn a lot of culture in France about different countries, but we still think that literature is a good way to learn and to discover a country. But I think it's here, we don't learn a lot with literature. We don't learn language with literature. So I think it depends where you're from in France or from your school, because for example, we have Anglais approfondi, so it's 2 more hours and you learn a little bit more about literature than other students.
Sure. I understand. So you have this separation of literature as a kind of culture for the culture's sake, but it's not at all integrated with the language
Yes.
element or in a language classroom. It's
Yes.
both separated. Great. Not great, actually, but for sharing that. We had Gergen first and then Laurine.
Thank you. I was in a very international group. So we had Margarita from Greece and Laurine from France and Leticia from Brazil. And I think we more or less agreed that much traditional language learning is actually rote learning and vocabulary learning, and culture is not sufficiently highlighted. And my own experience is I'm not very good in language learning, unfortunately. I only picked up one language well, which is English. And that was because I was very interested in pop culture, which is probably the culture with a small c. And that I found highly motivating. I was also very interested in Jacques Brel. But unfortunately, that was not sufficiently motivating for me to become good at French because I think the hardest.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. I mean, I note the idea of the culture in small c in this case, just because I labeled it like that. I don't think it's at all like that. But what I hold on to is the motivating factor, and that's what we should not forget for our learners. And if we start making those separations between literature, high culture, and everything else, pop culture, which is less important, less of a high kind of profile, that's where the problem starts. And that's what I wanted to establish. Laurine, a comment from you, and then we move on. Thank you all so much.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, very well.
Okay, so I'm from France as well, and I just wanted to, to say that we tend to learn a lot of grammar, and we often talk about culture such as American culture and maybe British, but we tend to forget to talk about, for example, Australian culture or New Zealand, as if it was kind of less interesting, and I think it's very disappointing because English is spoken there too, so it would deserve to be spoken about too.
Absolutely, the different type of representations of culture, I call it the multicultures, not just the standardized one.
Yeah, and in France we tend to focus a lot on American English and British English, and we tend to forget the other cultures.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, the same thing happens also in the UK, in my experience, about the standardized way of teaching a foreign language. We're talking about France a lot, or we're talking about Spain a lot, or Germany, or Italy, but not the Francophone, telephone, Spanish speaking countries. So that's, I think, then an issue that it is recognized in many parts of the world, unfortunately, but there are solutions to it. So so the place of the literature for me then in that context is not to bring in that high culture. I don't want that. It's not about that. Even though the literature that I will use could be considered high culture, at least the examples that you will see. But that's not the reason that I've chosen them. I choose literature for young learners in general as a platform from transitioning from self to other. For me, that process is very important in language learning. It's a process that as language teachers, we generally overlook. And not only just language teachers, in general, we overlook. We tend to want to transmit something new, something foreign, but we never think about the learners or the person you actually have in front of you, how relevant that will be to them. And that link is, for me, the crucial point to get that motivation in, and I think literature can offer that link. I have to acknowledge, of course, the multitude of literature that exists on why literature is good in the classroom. And I'm not going to go, stay on it too much, but there are many reasons of why we should have literature in the classroom. And more here as well, in terms of pedagogical input, in terms of language acquisition, in terms of enriching vocabulary and all the cultural elements that we are aware of. Where I want to stay at, and I want to explore more with you today, is the work of David Heiser, where he talks about that literature, and in his work specifically fairy tales, actually created a non-threatening environment for the students to be able to express themselves. So I'm hoping to show you that with a good choice of literary extracts, it can become a platform for students to develop the dialogues between themselves and the foreign. And I'm not using other in this case. It's very specific, the term. It's foreign, because it's not them, a language that is very alien to them, again, in my experience, still remains foreign if we don't make it very relevant to their own reality. So thinking about that and the value of that for the students, the goals are multiple. Having the literature as a platform, again, as a platform, I'm not going to talk about literary criticism or going through the text in a kind of very minutiae way. I'm talking about young learners starting to understand themselves, how they position themselves in the world. And I think, and always a very good starting point is understanding the social realities and their issues that they face in their everyday life. And the reason I'm saying that, as a French teacher for many years in the UK, I've always come across that resistance that, this is really not relevant to our reality. I used to work in a very challenging school environment, very working class, and they didn't see the point of learning and language because it wasn't relevant to them, because whatever it was in the book, whatever it was brought to them was very foreign, was even considered too posh, not really linking to their own reality. And you know what, I think I understand their point of view. I think as teachers, as educators, we have the moral responsibility to understand their everyday life, to see the issues that they face, to then, in my medium of making that link between the foreign and their social everyday life issues, is literature. And the reason for that is that the central fictitious character depersonalizes the difficult situation. It opens them up. They see that something that happens to that character in the book actually also happens to them. and it creates that link, that kind of magical moment where they identify themselves in situations that are also local to them, that actually kids in another part of the globe also face. There is a really, for me, extensive or and at the same time precise and at the same time very important concept of moral imagination from Nussbaum, which she was a philosopher. And what I think literature and students, literature can do for students is that it allows them to put themselves in another person's situations, but through that character. And by depersonalizing that, you get the students to engage and become more motivated, more active participants of the learning. So I'm hoping that I am communicating succinctly what I want to say and the place of literature for me. So then the choice of text is crucial. Again, I mentioned social reality, and I think it should resonate with the social reality. I think it should resonate with the current issues that they face or the emotional stage they're in and the cognitive stage that they're in. And in most cases, they're teenagers who are still developing and have a lot of issues around them. So by engaging students to be sensitive around the social issues and creating that opportunity, I think, again, we make that link between the classroom, the language we learn in the classroom, and what happens out in the society, in the real world. And I think language learning has the power to do so. So I will invite you, we're going to look at an extract together. And it's from De Vigan. It's a novel, No et moi, so no and me. And it addresses the contentious issue of homelessness in young people. So you've got a novel where the narrator, she's a 13-year-old girl, very gifted. Her name is Lou. And she becomes friends with an 18-year-old girl, No, who is homeless. And she, Lou, the 13-year-old, is very gifted. She observes the world and she wants to save her. She wants to save No. Lou, in this case for me, is that central fictitious character that I told you. It's a link. It's a step to open up the debate for the students. The specific extract that I will share with you is Lou preparing her speech and different points of view to her parents to announce she met No. And I think it's a really nice and easy passage to bring to young students of 12, 13-year-old students to explore with them. Now, in the next slide, there is the extract in French. What I will do, and I'm also very aware that not everybody speaks French, I will skip to the translation of it, and I will read the French extract, and also allow everyone to read the translation while I'm reading the extract. Does that make sense? All right, so, okay, here is the translation, and I'm going to read out the extract. Dans les grandes lignes, le plan est le suivant. Introduction. Je rencontrais une jeune fille de 18 ans qui vit dans la rue et dans des foyers. Elle a besoin d'aide. Je vais à l'essentiel, pas d'ajout, pas de fioritures. Grande 1. Thèse. Elle pourrait s'installer chez nous, le temps de reprendre des forces, de trouver du travail, J'ai prévu des arguments concrets et des propositions pratiques. Elle dormirait dans le bureau et participerait aux tâches ménagères. Grande antithèse. On donne soi-même les contre-arguments pour mieux le désintégrer. Certes, il y a des organismes spécialisés et des assistantes sociales. Ce n'est pas forcément à nous de prendre en charge une personne dans cette situation. C'est plus compliqué qu'il y paraît. Nous ne la connaissons pas. Nous ne savons pas à qui nous avons affaire. Grand 3, synthèse. Il y a plus de 200 000 sans-abri en France. Des milliers de gens dorment dehors. Il fait froid et chaque hiver, des gens meurent dans la rue. Conclusion. Qu'est-ce qui nous empêche d'essayer? De quoi avons-nous peur? Pourquoi avons-nous cessé de nous battre? I have the chills after reading that extract. I don't know about you. So I want to put you now in breakout groups. So I want you to hold on to that feeling, whatever you felt, the people who understand French, and how you feel about this extract. And I want you to discuss a little bit the pedagogical avenues that could take place based on this. So meaning bringing that to the students, or how does that make you feel if you don't want to talk about the pedagogical avenues? But how do you think the students would feel about it too? Yeah, I want you to be honest, and I'll bring you back in 5 minutes. Again, I will do quite just random groups on this. So stop sharing and put you into breakout rooms. Okay, great, and off you go. Great, everyone. Start coming back slowly. Did you get a chance to discuss a little bit about how you felt? Anybody would like to share? How does that extract make you feel? Or anything you discussed in relation to the extract as well? Clémentine?
Yes, we discussed about the structure of the text and the fact that the author would use the first part and then second part and then the synthesis, because I think it's something the students can relate to, in the sense that it's something that they would learn in class to structure the text this way. So yeah, we thought it was quite interesting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else would like to share what you discussed in your groups? Elpida?
Hello, thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Thank you. We also discussed a bit in French, because Marie is also from France. Well, I'm not from France, but I live in France.
Very nice.
So we found the text really interesting and touching, but we think that it's we're not sure if it's going to touch, or what would be the feeling in young students. That would be difficult in children. I mean, it would be better with adults. And then about the structure also, I said, but I'm not sure that I have seen this type of structure, like thesis and thèse, antithèse. It's a little bit French. I have seen it here because I'm from Greece and we don't really do that. So I'm not sure in which in an international context. I don't know how you do in England. Perhaps, yes, it always works like for and against the arguments, but the structure was a bit French, I think.
Okay.
My opinion, but it was really, really nice for high school students or a bit
Older. Yeah, sure. Thank you for both comments. And the reason the text was chosen, it was mostly for its social outlook, in the sense that you have a young girl, 13 years old, Lou, and she is thinking really, really intensively how she can help. And that was the speech she prepared to convince her parents. And I found that quite inspiring from a 13-year-old perspective, and bringing that to 13-year-olds, 12, 13-year-olds, actually, not only in the UK, but in general, it makes them more sensitive about the social issues that they face and that they are around them. And to see that this happening as well in other parts of the world is actually very motivating in terms of language learning. It gets them to see that they're not alone in the world, actually, when they see issues like that. And thank you for looking at the structure as well. I think it's important, the structure of thinking about all the linguistic accessibility around it as well. I wanted to share some ideas that I've put together. By all means, they're not exhaustive at all. Just some ideas that it could lead to a writing task for the reasons that we just mentioned in terms of structure and the argument space, because they're presented in a simple way. So number one, number two, number three, so kind of structural way, it can be accessible. And I wanted also to highlight the other aspect of literature, if you like. We think literature is in a book. We think literature is pages in a book, physical pages. But actually, a lot of the literature, even the very classical one, is made in films. And films and technology and visual and all of these aspects are very, very motivating to students. So this particular one the book is also translated into English to aid comprehension and also made into a film. So it will help, those resources, in my view, would help to go a little bit deeper into a discussion about homelessness in young people by overcoming that first hurdle of comprehension. Because in language learning, in language classrooms, we spend all the time going through a text or understanding every single word, and it's actually a barrier to everything else. So instead of going for a linear approach, I also encourage my students who are actually training to become teachers to actually go for it, give them a translation, and then actually will take you on to the next level. You want to get them to study the language together, if that's what they like to do. Find out what they like doing, so then you can have that more deep discussion into social issues. Okay, I will, for the purposes of time, I will go to the extract, this one. It's an extract from L'Ecclésion, Mondo et autre histoire, and it's about a young 10-year-old boy who is an immigrant. And his work is very, very sensitive, and I know that immigration has been quite a contentious issues worldwide, from Greece to anywhere you want to think about. And so it's an issue we tend to avoid, or an issue we tend to talk about with students who are 17, 18 years old, much older ones. But this work, again, it's a boy, the character is a boy, 10-year-old boy. So I'm going to, if you allow me to read the extract, and I'll show you the translation. And then we will finish with some thoughts on that and a conclusion overall. Personne n'aurait pu dire d'où venait Mondo. Il était arrivé un jour, par hasard, ici, dans notre ville, sans qu'on s'en aperçoive. Et puis, on s'était habitué à lui. C'est un garçon d'une dizaine d'années, avec un visage tout rond et tranquille, et de beaux yeux noirs un peu obliques. Mais c'était surtout ses cheveux qu'on remarquait, des cheveux bruns cendrés qui changeaient de couleur selon la lumière et qui paraissaient presque gris à la tombée de la nuit. Quand il arrivait vers vous, il vous regardait bien en face, il souriait et ses yeux étroits devenaient deux fentes brillantes. C'était sa façon de saluer. Qu'est-ce qu'il était venu faire ici, dans cette ville? Peut-être qu'il était arrivé après avoir voyagé longtemps dans la soute d'un cargo ou dans les derniers wagons d'un train de marchandises qui avait roulé lentement à travers le pays, jour après jour, nuit après nuit. Peut-être qu'il avait décidé de s'arrêter quand il avait vu le soleil et la mer, les villas blanches et les jardins de palmiers. Ce qui est certain, c'est qu'il venait de très loin, de l'autre côté des montagnes, de l'autre côté de la mer. Rien qu'à les voir, on savait qu'il n'était pas d'ici et qu'il avait vu beaucoup de pays. Il avait ce regard noir et brillant, cette peau couleur de cuivre et cette démarche légère, silencieuse, un peu de travers, comme des chiens. Il avait surtout une élégance et une assurance que les enfants n'ont pas d'ordinaire à cet âge. Et il aimait poser des questions étranges qui ressemblaient à des devinettes. Pourtant, il ne savait pas lire ni écrire. Okay. I will give you the opportunity to repeat your thoughts, what you thought about this. It's a very sensitive issue, and I want you to look at the text and how it portrays the little boy. How does it bring it close to the learners, to the people who are reading it? So 5 minutes again, maybe 4 minutes, just to allow me some time to make the conclusion. And I'll try to mix the group a little bit more, the breakout rooms. Okay, so that then we have a bit people talking to other people as well. Okay, enjoy, 3-4 minutes. Apologies, this was a short one due to time, and I hope you got a chance to at least say something about the text. Immigration is a subject that it's quite sensitive, and I think it's brought by L'Ecclésio very beautifully for children. What are your thoughts on the extract? I would really like to hear from you. Laurine.
So I think it's a wonderful topic to talk about because, as you said, it's a major issue in the world nowadays. So, and I think this is very good to talk about it because people who learn French sometimes think that everything's perfect in France, that we don't have this kind of issue. And obviously, well, it's a misconception. So I think it's very good because you can teach children that it's a misconception and there are these kind of issues everywhere. So I think it's very nice. And what's more, I think this text is very relevant because students can identify with the character because they are approximately the same age.
Yes.
So I thought this was very interesting about the text.
Yes, indeed. And also the description of the little boy as well is very interesting too. And the fact that because of immigration globally, they actually see those kids coming into the classrooms at random moments during the year.
Yes.
Actually, hopefully, this type of extract with literature, you can address the subject.
Yeah, this is true. I think by reading this text, they can just say, oh, this could have been me. So I think that's very nice.
Thank you. Some further ideas and some concluding thoughts. Let's see if I can manage to share properly. I think I think we covered most of that. It's just I wanted to make you aware that it creates the first step building that intercultural competence by observing different behaviors other than their own. What is also beautiful, exactly that extract, it's also is the beginning of the film. And so the book has been adapted into a film. And I found the exact same extract and the beginning of the film with the boy arriving, the description. So that can have a lot of pedagogical implications for teachers. And for me, literature in the way that I have presented it today creates those bridges for empathy. And I think that's what we need in the language classroom. We need to appreciate diversity a bit more than just the language itself spoken by a certain group of people in the world. So I think that's crucial for me, and that's why I wanted to share this with you today. And those kids, in a way, they are kids, they're characters, they're fictitious characters, but they're kids. I think that will speak to the younger learners and hopefully will bring to the classroom that intercultural citizenship, that responsibility that they have towards the other, and opening those discussions for the social issues with confidence, or if not straight away, at least they're aware. So with the kind of awareness which it feeds in slowly into your lessons and beyond. So what I'm thinking then, that's learning in this way can also become helpful, not only for the language's purposes, because the language's purposes can be achieved. I mean, if you look at this text, you would say, oh, this is a description of a character, because we tend to think in terms of topics when we look at language learning. Today, I need to teach about physical descriptions. Today, I need to do the verbs or the grammar point or the past tense, whatever it is. But this gives you access to those elements and a bit more. That sense of community, the fact that children actually have similar worries and challenges. And I think a lot of the things mentioned here are already discussed. But what literature brings is that feeling of that poetic adaptation, that chill that it gives you when you read something. When somebody brings it onto the paper, something you wouldn't dare talking about, but well, it's there in a very sensitive manner on there for you, and also most of the times adapted into film. So kids nowadays have these words, they have access to a plethora of technological means, which means they do see these things, but sometimes they're misinformed as well. So I think it's our duty to bring them that confidence to face the other. And I think that link, that step towards that interculturality, intercultural awareness, the cultural competence, literature can do very sensitively. And I think it's generally very severely overlooked. And unfortunately, we focus too much on the form and vocab, but we forget those elements that are very important for that link to be made. Thank you all so much for being here. That's the end of the workshop. And I know in terms of time, we don't have time, but I'll be very happy to answer any questions now if you want it, or even further into your thinking. Please email me anytime. Thank you.
So thank you all.
Thank you.
I think this was a great interactive workshop. We thank Dr. Fotini Diamantidaki, our Fotini, for this, and you all, the participants. I just found that the time we had, especially at the breakout rooms, was we would need a little bit more time. I love the interaction we had, so this is great. If you would like to continue interacting and you don't have already sent your email, if you don't have registered and you got the link directly from Dr. Diamantidaki, please contact Dr. Diamantidaki because we would like to continue interacting with other workshops and ideas. This is the purpose of the Communication Institute of Greece. Thank you so much and take care.
Thank you. Thank you for being here from different parts of the world. Thank you to Jürgen and Michael, our VPs at the Institute. Thank you for being here and supporting as well. And thank you to all the students from Lille as well, very much. And very nice to meet new people.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Have a good evening or morning or afternoon.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Michael. Bye, Jordan.